Hello and welcome to a preview of the IEM Dallas. What are we calling this? It's IEM 17 Dallas? Yeah, we have got to do this pretty quick because, I don't know, by the end of the recording we might have lost all remaining teams and have just a bunch of stand-ins from ESL Premier, I think, and that might be a bit of a downer to end the video on. So, let's introduce my co-host, my featured guest today. It's Yumi. Thank you very much for joining me. How have you been doing?
Yeah, I've been all right. Been enjoying a little bit of a break, I guess, after the major, which a very exciting major in that. But this being the follow-up event afterwards, I mean, kind of yeah. I think I have the same sort of ifs and sort of side eyes looks at this particular tournament.
Yeah, the most recent, I think, announcement was Heroic not being able to make it and being replaced by the almighty MIBR. Fresh off their show match loss to OG, of course, who are with the two new players. It's all a bit of a mess, but hopefully we can make some sense of it, bring some interesting perspectives, and maybe, I don't know, get a general sense of what's going to be going down over the next week or two, or however long tournaments take now, in Dallas. So let's start with, I think, the most obvious thing, the favourites. Yumi, who is your favourite? And please tell me it's not Cloud9.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, I think most people will just go, "Oh, FaZe have won the last, 3 big tier tournaments. I mean, the major included." But I don't know. I kind of look at FaZe and I think that they should just win this because we look at the field of teams. Really, their closest contest was against Navi at the major. And even then, I'm still like hesitant. Like maybe even like a Spirit, there really could have been potential, but they're also not in the field of teams here. I want to say that FaZe should be favorites, but I also think the team has kind of accomplished what they needed to do. Weirdly enough, like Karrigan's first major, same with Robs, Broke. Like this is a squad of an international team that has failed to match expectations for far too long, and now they finally get the protege teaching Rops and Karrigan pairing back in that FaZe roster, and they're just able to win from there. I almost want to say like the drive might be gone, but I don't know. That's a mentality thing that only the players can really determine, right? Because Rain, even when people were saying remove him from the roster, he just comes in and has like the tournament of his life. So
It's a bit weird to think about in that sense, because they have, brought in Rops, they won Katowice, they won Pro League, they've won the Major. I don't think their momentum stops, though, so I think, clear favourites going in based off what we've seen from them in the past. I don't think it stops here, though. I think we get at least another event of dominance, but their biggest challenges, I think, at this event, it would have been, prior to the Major, I'd have argued this Cloud9 roster, sure, they had the Russia thing, let's put it that way, which kind of threw off a lot of the CIS teams. They seem to be recovering, and then the Major happened, and I'm like, are they back? Are they good again? They still have the players. They still have the championship pedigree, I think, in terms of the players that they have. It's always been a question of what they can do on the stage. I feel like if we're going to see anyone challenge them, it's them or G2. Who's more, I don't know, favoured out the two of those for you?
I mean, I don't know what to think of G2, I'll be honest.
Right.
They're like, I had high expectations for them at the major, but also I think probably piggybacked a little too much off like the success of like Bit as an academy come up player, and I think a lot of people kind of vicariously looked at somebody like Monacy and said, oh, he'll be able to do the same. And he had good games, and I think he still hit a lot of his important shots, but then all of a sudden Nico's missing, so I almost don't know what to make of it, because Nico's having to change up a bunch of his roles to actually accommodate for someone like Monacy. Like he's changed some of his spots on maps like Mirage, even though that's a map that he's been very good at. I imagine he was also willing to concede those spots because he's usually very good at it. He's like, I'll just play anywhere, actually. I worry for G2 because I think you want to continue to use someone like Nico to their full effectiveness, but I don't think that they do that quite well. So I struggle to get too invested in the G2 story until actual results are met with it,
Because we saw, they got that second place finish at Katowice, and that still kind of felt like the Nico show. I think we've seen a more like a transition towards the Alexi B Xtaz control of the side, which we didn't see that initially, hence why Nico was still popping off. Nico was still the big carry. I think this has to be an event where we see a forward progress in order to justify this massive overhaul of coaching, leadership. Otherwise, I think we have to start looking at personnel changes again. Like, your Kinda's on the market. If just playing Nico in these roles isn't working, maybe you do have to go to a more stacked lineup like FaZe have, where you're 4 riflers deep, where even your weakest player, your IGL, can hit a shot every now and then. Because Alexi B's been weak. Jax is a great role player. Don't get me wrong, I love him on a lot of top teams. It's just if the team needs an extra round, an extra spark of magic, he's not usually that guy. I think we have to start talking changes if we're not looking at a top 4 placement here.
Yeah. I actually found it quite interesting because I think going into this major and seeing Nico's like sort of drop off in performance in some of the big games, I was actually of the opinion that he, like, the philosophy in the team and how Nico is sort of approaching team play has changed quite significantly. Because if you look at like how he was on FaZe or even early G2, you know, when Nexa was still at the helm, especially on CT sides, if Nico wanted to do something, like, he would have teammates there with him doing that thing. You know, like a mid control, you know, there'd be 2 flashes coming over from teammates. You know, he'd pull resources over to help facilitate what he wanted to do or what the sort of mid game read was going to be. But I almost want to say that for the major, they bought into the Alexi B philosophy of like him doing the sort of micro detailing and saying like, these players do this, these players do this, and Nico doesn't have that same voice. Because I imagine if Nexa's still in this team and they have that sort of maybe Xtaz like structure, Nico's still able to pull those resources while having the inherent structure. But I think Alexi wants to be a bit more hands-on, even though he said like, oh yeah, these players don't need the micromanaging.
Yeah.
I think that is just the way that Alexi likes to play the game anyway. So even if they don't need it, he's still going to be like, we should have maybe done this. Like, that was my vision for the round anyway, and because we left it a little bit too loose, things have kind of fallen off. So yeah, I hope they develop. But I agree that if this event, which is probably, I mean, because of the swapping in and out of teams and so many stand-ins and things, if this isn't the event that G2 suddenly like sneak one past FaZe or even an ENCE, that's another person that we have to even consider.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is a worrying sign.
Yeah, because you'd think coming into the major, I mean, ENCE top 4, they got absolutely spanked by Na'Vi, but ENCE was still a team we thought had like real potential and were really rising up. And then we see at this event, yeah, Snax is playing instead of Spinks, which sure, both have an S, an N, and an X in it, but aside from that, there's not too much to really equate between the two. Snax is playing fine at times on these lower level Polish teams, but he's not Spinks, who's been, well, pretty much top 5 rifler in the world, maybe better at times. Not superb on the big stage, but he was lights out and up until that moment where they just fell apart in front of Na'Vi. So yeah, ENCE not the contender we thought they'd be, and I think this probably brings us to the end of our list of favourites, because even the big names, the Vitalities, the Astraluses, the NIPs, everyone's either got a terrible run of form coming in or playing with a stand-in like NIP are. So that doesn't feel like there's many other favourites left in this field, are there?
Well, I mean, like, I know you said don't say Cloud9 is one of them, but really, like, they are a full CIS team that have been able to secure themselves visas and get themselves in there. And also, I don't know, I've always thought that like Cloud9 kind of struggled by being too brazen or like too sort of aggressive in the way that they think that they could play the game. Because during the online stint, they were very strong. You know, they played very robust Counter-Strike, played it to a level that I think people underestimated in a lot of ways. But then when it came to actually getting to these LAN events, it was like they didn't want to change anything about how they played at all. And even if things weren't working, it was... I almost feel like Nafany is like got too much of an ego as a caller to a certain degree to change it and adapt too heavily. Because even in the online era, they were praising their analysts for some of the counter-strat work and kind of the work behind the scenes. But I almost want to say that that's lessened to a degree. Like maybe the workload that they were taking on during that online era or the online period isn't sustainable when you're actually having to travel to different events. And so
Right.
That's maybe where they're suffering.
Right, yeah,
But
well, it was the old quote from Blade, wasn't it? That he said he needed 2 weeks between every LAN, essentially,
mhm.
to enact kind of his vision upon the team, to allow the team to fully recover as he wants them to. And perhaps they are suffering the consequence of that more packed schedule now, like with the extra travel, as you said, the extra time it takes out of your life to be a part of this tier 1 LAN circuit. It is having some consequence on them. You also think, like, young players still, for the most part, haven't had the experience because they did come up during the online period. Again, this is looking like another tournament where they should be taking steps forward. With the weakened field, it doesn't feel like much outside of top 4 is acceptable. And if you look at their group, they should be getting into the playoffs with a decently high seed because, yeah, MIBR complexity, big, stand-in NIP, Liquid, Imperial, Furia. I think Furia should be the toughest challenge, but we don't even consider them a favourite anymore because of, well, because it's not that roster, that one Furia roster who really scared everyone. It's a bit different and doesn't quite have the same teeth as they used to.
I don't know. I actually really like the Furia roster. I thought they could have done far more damage at the event. I'm just worried because I think Safe, as much as I loved him as a move to Furia, I almost feel like he doesn't have enough of a voice on this team to demand all the sort of high impact positions. Because even when it comes to some of these early opening engagements, I think Art will still want to go for that, especially on CT sides. Like I know that he's willing to do that almost all the time, but to a certain degree, you want your star AWPer to get those impact kills and be able to be a bit more mobile in the way that they play. Because I almost feel like Safe is too static as a result of having to play around what Art wants to do. Like I almost feel like with Henny in the previous iteration of Furia, where people were far more hyped up on them, that Henny would almost disregard what people had to say and just say, I'm just going to do this. And you can
Yeah.
either deal with that or we're going to have a problem, you know? Um,
Yeah.
I think Safe is a bit too team oriented to sort of break the inherent structure and just let Art kind of do his thing. I will say at the last event, at the major, there were a few games where Art was just picking up the AWP less. I almost, like, during that period where he had to AWP, even though he got new AWPers in, he felt like he like gravitated to that weapon again too continuously for my liking. But
It was a
getting
period
better,
where it
maybe.
did feel like his philosophy was very much, I know where the AWP needs to be, I know the feeling, the timing, exactly what needs to happen, and I can't communicate it to this guy or this guy.
But it's
I
a
don't
trust
rely
thing,
on that
right?
guy. Yeah, exactly. It's trusting them to have that decision making that he expects from them. And I think with Safe, I mean, a great amount of restraint you showed there to not say he's playing too safe, but it does feel like that at times where he needs to take that step out of line and make something happen. But I agree with the general idea that this team is well constructed, well composed. I don't have any problem with the lineup. It's just, we haven't had that feeling that we did when Furia were upsetting, rampaging, doing their ridiculous art things, really, backed up by some of the finest rifle play in all the scene. It doesn't quite feel like the same level. So maybe we see at this event, again for them, another chance to prove themselves. We have to keep saying that, but there's a lot of teams who need to prove themselves. We saw a massive shuffle. A lot of teams changed, and a lot of teams haven't been able to show off that they've made these big strides and they've really improved. I think if we get onto the dark horses now, we can start looking at a team like Vitality, who made some of the biggest name changes and have so far been yet to really figure out any big improvements relative to their French roster, who, well, lest we forget, ended the year winning events.
Oh God, yeah, they were. I think people will come before the major were actually very hyped up on the idea that they had fixed a lot of their issues. You know,
Yeah.
I think their CT sides looked a lot better. Even the way that they were calling in mid rounds on T sides looked significantly more refined. But then when we get to the major, we get to the big stage games, and I'm just yeah I don't know what has changed and whether this is the Danish versus French philosophy thing. I think Apex had an interview like ahead of the major, kind of talking about how the Danish players would work off of feeling, whereas the French
Yeah.
were far more structured in their approach. You know, far more flow charty, I think. Um, but you would look at rounds and just say like, why are Vitality not reacting to a certain degree? Like they would lose two players on a CT side, and they would just stay stoic in their spots and not move. And I guess that like some of that might be save philosophy, um, but it felt like they were almost always reacting throughout their games as opposed to like creating opportunities. And I just don't know that that's a sustainable way to play in top tier Counter Strike anymore. It hasn't been for probably two and a bit years. So maybe they have fixed a lot of the comms issues, but even then, still finding the in sort of internal role dynamics might still be a bit up in the air.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. But something I think we need to point out, well, that I specifically feel like pointing out, really, is this Vitality switching over to English. It was a big deal. We always talk about the French and their English skills, and for me, one of the biggest problems it hasn't been really necessarily them having to common English. It's, I think, ZywOo taking an extra half second to process things. We don't have this on Vitality in the past. If you needed a big round, you needed a big clutch, you needed a big multi-kill, ZywOo was able to provide it. There are times on this side where I watch how he reacts to situations, 2v3s, 3v4s, where he doesn't seem as aware of what's going on around him. He doesn't seem as aware of where he needs to go on the map, where he needs to push, where he needs to apply pressure. And I think that's still that adjustment to this English-speaking reality they've had to adopt. And I don't think we're going to see much of an improvement in terms of results until we get that side of things working again, until we figure out either a new role for ZywOo, a new way to play him, like maybe have to literally hold his hand throughout every round, or he just figures it out in his own mind, like the problems he's having, and goes back to being, well, one of the world's two superstars, like true superstars.
It's so weird, man, because they tried changing his role before. Do you remember the whole Nivera sixth-man roster situation? Like
that mess, yeah.
They did that because ZywOo wanted to rifle more in spots where he didn't feel like the AWP was really the weapon that he wanted to have, So this will be another time where they might have to sort of re-engage or reimagine his particular playstyle, which is so strange because he seems like when he's got the AWP in his hands, he's such a fluid player. Like in sort of peak Vitality, super dynamic, never felt like it was ever a hindrance. And then that suddenly became this planted seed of doubt. And yeah, I think it's fair to say I don't even know that I would categorize ZywOo in sort of top 5, top 8 categories for the year at the moment, just because he's been far too bog standard, kind of boring, in all fairness, which is so crazy to think of because he's such an exciting player when things are working.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Fluid, I think, is a great word for the way he, used to be with that AWP. And Vitality are missing that spark. Yeah, they definitely are. We see great rounds out of Apex. We see like massive plays being made at times by the Dupree and the Magisk. But until your AWPer gets truly engaged, and especially an AWPer like ZywOo, who gets to be such a huge star when he's playing on his game, you're going to struggle to replace it, even with some of, historically, the greatest riflers in the game. If they're not Nico at his peak, if they're not playing like Spinks has in Ents, you're asking too much from Dupree and Magisk and Apex. They're not going to be those guys right now. I think we eventually got to my point there. They're not going to be able to make up for that lack of star power. So Vitality have to continue to show us something better. I don't really feel like I've seen a marked improvement. I've seen, we saw those small adjustments, those small improvements, as you said. But then as we saw at the major, it was maybe a bit of an illusion because it just didn't feel right. Mm-hmm. But all right, Dark Horse, do you have a team you think sneakily might just go and win this? Just because there's a bit of a gap, there's a bit of a weakness in amongst a lot of teams, and FaZe Clan, maybe they can get rocked if they're caught off guard by someone.
If we were working with the normal team, like I actually almost wanted to say like NIP, but now that they've got ZTR sort of slotted in and they won't have Hamfist, like that's too big a shift, unfortunately for me.
Okay.
I'll say maybe what I said ahead of the last major. Like I think Furia can be the dark horse upset. I don't think that was really a hot take I know HLTV had this whole article thing, and then everyone was like, "What do you mean dark horse?" Because there's some sort of like translation issue. People apparently dark horse is like a bad thing when it's actually
Well,
supposed to be
okay,
kind of a
yeah.
good thing. Um, yeah,
Just means
I
you're not a
think that's
favorite. I think you can win. Like,
yeah,
that's all it really means.
that's basically the premise. But I don't think people really understood that. It would have to just be. I want to say Furia. That's
Okay.
my. I was gonna pick two, but then I figured wasn't really in the spirit of things.
Okay. No, I agree. Fury's a good pick. I'm. I want to. I'm not sure how crazy I'm feeling, but we haven't seen Mouse in a while. And yeah, they have to come through the Group A, the tougher group in my eyes. But based off some of the upsets I'm going to call in about 5 minutes, I think they've got a chance of making it out of their group in either the first or second seed.
I did also see a Reddit post recently about like them losing to Sprout and then Mao's NXT beating Sprout. So
Yeah, that's Tier 2 online CS. It happens every other day. Like,
yeah,
if people followed Tier 2 fully, they'd be screeching about upsets every other second. I mean, it is how it is.
swap the teams. The academy team is better than the real team.
Hey, we'll see it, Lan. I don't think Mouse NXT and Mouse would be exchanging games in quite that same sense. Sprout do not stand a chance against either one in a LAN setting, from what I've seen.
If you're picking Mouse, I want to ask you about something because I've had this thought recently. What do you think about? I mean, how do you think about this Mouse squad since they've made the changes?
Well, I've made it quite clear that I think Dexter is getting away with murder at times. At least he was during the last year or so. But BMAS, I don't know. I watch him play and I watch the team play again, and I think it makes more sense with JDC slotting in and taking some of those roles that BMAS wasn't too comfortable with. It has just looked a little more fluid and a little, I don't know, like more cohesive than it did before. Sure, we're still looking at a team with a lot of question marks. I mean, can Torshi continue to produce? He had some off moments. Can Frozen be a superstar again, like truly? Because he's been pretty good, but he hasn't been as dominant. There are still question marks, but I feel like the roles that we've put them in now make more sense. I feel like BMAS has shown us a level of form that honestly just makes me believe in the team in general. It's a dark horse. Let's put it that way. But
you've really segmented them to the real shadows here.
Oh yeah, it's the darkest horse that literally I hope no one else other than me has seen coming, nor the bookies. So Mouse Sports, I think, will be a very dark horse. Hard to predict. Hard for anyone else, I think, to see what I'm seeing if they don't. I don't know. It's a very hard feeling thing for me that.
I think my feeling on this Mouse squad, by the way, is just like Dexter actually has a real chance to show that he has chops as an in-game leader. I don't think when he had Acor and Rops, like, I know people love Rops to death, but I don't think Rops was really buying into the philosophy when Dexter was there as an in-game leader, because not only was he unproven, like Rops' first team, he works with Carrigan for a lot of that, and like it's a massive shift. I almost want to say that Rops was one of the reasons that Mouse did eventually fall off.
Rops' level himself and Rops' buy-in.
Yeah, I think he just played far too much for himself as opposed to ever bending to what Dexter needed him to do. So yeah, I think now that Torzi and JDC are in, like, Frozen and Bemis have very clearly bought into the idea, or at least are being put in the right spots to succeed.
Yeah.
I think this is his first real chance to show that he has chops as an in-game leader, because if they look bad sort of structurally on their T sides or even sort of like mid-round decisions on CT, then we're going to have the ability to isolate Dexter as maybe a problem area, because even before, like, yeah, he was supposed to be fragging harder than he is. Like, that was the whole point. Like, he's a fragging in-game leader.
That was the advertisement, wasn't it? It's like, come see our new fragging IGL, and you watched him, you're like, so has he started yet? Or
I mean, Carrigan kind of popped off at the major, didn't he? So
yeah, he did.
Yeah, but I will say I'm not really sold on JDC. Like, I understand that he was brought in for the good vibes and mentality and the fact that he was young. but I'm still not that convinced that somebody even like a Keto wouldn't just be a
Right.
better player for the position. So
Well, the thing I know about JDC is that everyone who's involved in the backroom staff at Mouse Sports is absolutely in love with him. And during his time on Mouse and XT, it was intimated, or at least I heard, basically, the moment you need a sub for the top team, no matter the role, as long as it's a rifler, we'll take JDC.
wow, okay,
So they really rate him in terms of his vision of the game, his skill, clearly, but also, yeah, the fact that he can slot in and be basically the guy to fill any gap. So JDC in that sense, for me, seems like a slam dunk, because no matter what you believe Frozen and BMAS should be doing or where they should be on the map, you know JDC is able to plug the holes. Dexter has his loyal soldier. He has the guy who listens, says yes, and does it to perfection. Quite importantly, not just tries to do it, does it. So for me, JDC, I'm really high on that promotion as such. Sure, the numbers will never look fantastic. He will never put up a 1.2 HLTV rating and bang out everyone's heads. You know, be that guy on the server. But he'll do so many things that go unappreciated that it allows the rest of the team to shine. And I think that's the main reason why they've been so happy to just promote him, stick him in the team, be like, yep, we're done. It's because of that sort of role he's even able to play. Right, so that's my very dark horse pick. And now it's time for some upsets, because these are the teams I think will... Well, I hope you have some as well that you think will upset the apple cart, really throw a spanner in the work, or break the bracket, as I think I wanted to put it, then I couldn't find a good graphic for it.
yeah, I hadn't really thought about like the matchups, so
Even
you might have
not
to
specifically,
take lead on these, but
even non-specific, do you think there's any team here who might be massively underestimated and just come in and ruin someone's chances? Who would be your pick for that type of upset?
I don't know. Do people rate Astralis? Because I could see it. I could see them doing quite decently at this event, but I don't know that people have high expectations of them, or if they like. I know Astralis has a mega fandom anyway, so
Yeah,
people might
most
just
of
be
Denmark.
sold.
Yeah,
It's I kind of I am sold on the Astralis to a certain degree, but also yeah, I don't have them as favorites. I just a couple wins here or there I could definitely see.
well, I straight up think the first best of one, G2 have to play Movistar Riders, and Movistar Riders are the most annoying team. I think in the who get any sort of tier 1 play. They're not a tier 1 team by any estimation. They don't have any other slots required to be realistically a tier 1 side, but every time they show up and you've given them time to prep, they come in and they win games. They did it at Pro League and they've done it before. They will continue to do it, and I think they win that best of one against G2, who might come in... You know, they should be wary of Movistar, but I don't think they're going to take them as seriously as they should. And Movistar will do to them what they do to so many big-name teams and just casually come in and win a 16-14, or in a best-of-3 win 2 16-14s. They seem to be only able to win close games. But that's a big upset I think I see coming immediately. On day one, Movistar taking out G2.
I think from my memory, Movistar, they banned Dust 2 as well, don't they? I swear
I can't remember their pick ban off by heart. But...
yeah, I swear they're a Dust 2 perma, and I know G2 are kind of fans of that map anyway, so I could see it. Yeah, I like the Movistar guys. I think everyone has the right mentality to make that work. Yeah, I'm not sure. I hadn't even really thought about Movistar as well, because of course they're one of the replacement teams, so
yeah,
they're not even supposed to be here in the first place. I think maybe that could lead into your narrative of G2 sort of getting caught off guard, just being like, oh, we don't have to play anyone too serious. Like this is
it's just Movistar Riders. Yeah, it's just these 5 Spanish guys who are pretty old as well. I think they're
no
quite
one
an
ever expects
team.
them.
No one ever expects the Spanish 5 stack. They're always worried about the Danes, but not the Spanish. And yeah, well, the one reservation I have is that they will likely play Mirage. I've seen Movistar Riders, they leave it a lot, they like to float it. And I remember that one game that scarred me for life when they played against Ents, and they just refused to play a player on short on their CT side. Basically the entire time they were playing like a double stack on apartments, just endlessly boosting someone up to push it. and it didn't work, but they did it the entire half and only won this. I think they lost their CT half 7-8, so that terrified me. But at the same time, they still won that game. They still ended up winning that game. So they're an incredibly annoying team to play against, I think, an incredibly difficult team to properly prep for. And I don't think G2 are going to do a good job in either sense. So this should be a shocking upset and one that makes me rather rich.
Funny, when you said that they scared you, I almost thought that like they were so determined to do this one thing for the entire CT half that their determination is what scared you. I thought that's the sort of direction you're going.
Yeah,
Instead
there's
of like
a look in their eyes.
they're just so committed to this one philosophy.
Yeah, this one terrible idea. They're so committed to it, I was genuinely afraid for them. But no, it's not exactly that, but it kind of is. I mean, their coach is called Blade after all. They should be well prepped. Like, I think they're going to upset G2, and after that, here's where the Mouse narrative starts. You know, Mouse will have beaten Snax's Ents. They're going to take on Movistar in a best of 3, I believe. Are we playing best of 3s at that point? I never know with these events. The formats seem to change every week.
Best of 1s in first round, best of 3s every other round.
Good. Perfect. Best of 3 Mouse Sports, take that home. And all of a sudden, they're in the 3rd round of the upper bracket. They're already through. They don't have to beat FaZe, who probably will be there. So that's where the Mouse ideas started coming from. But in Group B, I haven't touched too much on them. Furia Imperial being a replacement team. Do you think Imperial can repeat some of their major heroics in this sort of matchup?
I think in a best of 1, they're gonna suffer a lot. I think they've really showed their grit in the best of 3s when they really needed to pull out results. That's where Imperial kind of strove. They either came in cold to a lot of the best of 1s at the major, or they just take a little bit of time to like adapt to the playstyle. Because I have no doubt they put in their prep work. They seem like a team that do heavily prep. But yeah, I think they're just kind of destined for the lower bracket and then best of 3s. Like I could very easily see them winning a game against like a Liquid or something.
Okay, so speaking of Liquid, chances against Cloud9. Do you think there are any? Well, do you think they're strong? Because there's always literally a chance, but
yeah, I actually no.
Just no.
That's a really like, I don't know, man. I said Liquid in the lower bracket, and so I feel like I have to commit to that.
I felt that coming when you said that. I was like, oof, that was the next matchup. He's going one way. He certainly feels a certain way about that matchup. Oh, it used to be an NA matchup. Then they had a chance to win it, but
I always have to catch myself with Cloud9 though, because I fell in love with them during the whole Gambit Youngsters come up. You know, like
right.
I love the story, and I think I'm like too far gone. You know, I'm in too deep. I just think they need a bit more time, and Nafany needs a reality check, and that's all they need. But
simple. Just fix the little things, all 3 of them, and we're good, right?
Just fix the problems. But I don't. Yeah, I think they've just got a better depth against versus a team like Liquid.
Okay. Well, for me, Cloud9 should be a lock-in, but I'm usually only worried about Cloud9 once we have to talk about a big stage. That's when I usually start to get my doubts and think, oof, they could lose this one. Or they might choke this one away. But at the major, they lost to Imperial. That Mirage game, that 16-5.
Yeah.
I literally went to bed assuming Cloud9 were going to win that game. There was no way. That was like, sure, they got rattled a bit. They had to take it to map 3, but it's Mirage. You've got Hobbit, you've got Axar, you've got Shiro. You have enough firepower to like blow almost anyone out of the server. And they got absolutely demolished. And I just thought, that was too much pressure.
Yeah.
It wasn't even in front of a crowd.
I think that they struggle being favorites.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's part of my issue. Is I actually think some like Nafany and coaching staff and their general prep work just falls apart when they're favorites. They're just like, oh, we'll just do our thing.
Okay.
Whereas I always felt like they were actually the counter-stratting team. To me, they did a fantastic job just like picking up on little details about setups and finding a not over the top counter reaction, but would kind of slot somebody in a position where it's like, okay, if this when we do this, like this guy should react kind of like this, and you might be able to punish. Like those are the
Right.
kinds of details I've always felt like Gambit, now Cloud9, were able to do. But yeah,
Hmm.
being favorites, I think, intimidates them to a certain degree, because I don't think they practice the same way, or they prepare the same way for those types of games.
Okay. Yeah. So a bit of a weird one for Cloud9 then, because the amount of games they've lost recently, maybe they no longer consider themselves favourites going into matchups with some of the bigger names they're going to have to face, like potentially a Furia in their second round matchup. In playoffs, potentially someone like FaZe, G2, Mouse, whoever ends up making it out of Group A and having to face them. There's maybe a mentality shift from them, but they don't consider themselves the best team in the world, or as they were during a lot last year, a top 2, top 3 side who are capable of beating anyone, taking home any trophy. Maybe, yeah, I guess hopefully in your case, it'd be they consider themselves to be the number 2 team in every matchup, and they
Yeah.
do find those little things, those little quirks, those little details that they're so good at hammering home when they needed to. It's an interesting one, but Cloud9 for me still remain like on paper. The fact that I basically refuse to talk about them as favourites is kind of sad when you think about like who they are and what they should be achieving. But the return to LAN, the return to stages has been devastating for them. I think that's played a massive part.
Hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree with more. Whether it's travel or
Yeah.
just the stage pressure.
Okay, I want to mention one more team, and it's not looking for Org. So sorry, Aussies. I don't think they've got a chance of winning any games. But it's Complexity. They have been disappointing, to put it as politely and as formally as I can. Disappointing. And I'm not sure where to start pointing the fingers, because I liked JT on Extra Assault. I thought Fang, and I still think Fang is honestly America's future, or North America's future. Absolute excellent rifle, absolute soldier with amazing mechanics. But then I'm sat here thinking, but it's not working, and I don't think the pieces have gotten much worse. Junior for OC clearly has been a downgrade, but aside from that, what's been the root cause of basically the poor performances?
Oh, I don't know that Junior knows how to play in sort of like the JT system. I actually
Right.
don't know if Junior knows how to play in many systems. In complete honesty, I feel like this guy has just been chopped and changed into too many rosters, and I feel like he takes maybe too long to adapt, which is maybe why his performance kind of takes a hit. Because I actually think he is a pretty solid opera, but just maybe doesn't have the same way of thinking to get up to scratch in time.
Right.
Um, yeah, I don't want to just pin it on the opera, because as much as I do like the squad, I also just think that there's like too many players kind of doing the same thing. Like in my head, if I guess prior to the Liquid arrangement, if you had told me this roster had been formed, Grim, Floppy, and Fang, like I think those are three players that are very sort of intertwined and very similar in the way that they play, especially on T sides. Um,
Right.
that's me not having maybe the deepest ingrained knowledge of the US scene, but I always thought like that was the role that Grim was supposed to accomplish, that Floppy was supposed to accomplish. And they can do that, but I just I I don't see the complexity side, unfortunately. I don't know what's gone awry, I guess.
Okay, so there's no real solution in sight. It's just it's a bit of a tough one to untangle in that sense. Maybe they need some more fixed, hard role players like Fang, Floppy, Grim. Like Fang, I know he's a role player in the sense that he does a lot of little things, but
Hmm.
maybe they need someone who's just the hard entry, hard anchor bitch. Right, there's no other way to put it. The bitch of the
Yeah,
team, like who just has to be
like a very
terrible.
European or like thought process, right? Like I think in US teams they've always been, oh yeah, we're super dynamic. We can all do like we can
Yeah,
all entry, we can all do,
all
and
warp,
that's
all
like
do everything.
and that's very much like stemmed from years and years of like pug routing and pug systems. But European systems are very much like you will run in first, or you will drop guns, or you will AWP, or you lurk. Like you have spots and you only do that thing. I almost
Right.
feel like it's too loosey goosey.
That might be the solution. I guess it's. For me, Grim just hasn't. He's looked so weak even on this team. Like, you know, 'cause we saw him on Liquid. Like, oh, he's not got his roles, not got his positions. He might not have his roles or positions here either. But at some point, mate, you got to learn how to play the game. Like, at some point, just you've got to remember, like, stand here, shoot them in the head. It cannot be that hard because he's been so bad for so long that even on this team, he's not able to shine. That. I think he has to take a look in the mirror and just reflect on what he actually has to be doing to make his teams win. He should be focusing more on that team aspect and making it happen, but maybe it's just cut him, cut Junior, bring in some Europeans. I don't know. I wanted this complexity roster to work so much, and it just hasn't reached it, hasn't been anywhere close to where it could have been.
Mm-hmm.
But is there any other team that's really like taken your fancy on this list?
I don't want to count MIBR out because I actually liked their players from like Bravos or whatever before they joined MIBR. Yeah. I did like them, but they are also in the midst of changes, right? Like Woody's out.
Yeah, they brought in BRN as I think people called him, but it's an annoying name to say, mate.
Brunzan or whatever. Yeah, so they are in the midst of changes. So I guess I don't know. I kind of just probably won't watch Group B. I will be honest. It's all a bit of a Group B in comparison is just weak.
Feels like ESL Pro League NA. Like most of the games, don't want to watch. Like back when that was a thing. Like you remember half the NA Pro League, I just didn't want to watch when it existed.
I didn't even realize how many NA teams were just in Group B. That's actually mental.
Well, Brazilian as well, but still, like the Americans are just polluting. No offense, America, but you filled that group up to the brim.
Yeah.
That's what I said. Like the Group B, there's some chances for teams you wouldn't have expected otherwise to come through because there's no Na'Vi, there's no big teams, but. Mm-hmm. It is mostly just NA fighting against NA.
Yeah, that is a bit depressing. And
on that downer.
Hey, but at least there's a chance that someone from North America or South America could make it through to the playoffs. So
yeah, the Dallas crowd have something to cheer about. Other than
that is, I actually do wonder whether that was
tactical
part of the philosophy. Yeah, that might have been. Yeah, I mean, you know.
Well, we look at who they replaced. Maybe not, but
yeah, Tio's gonna market it. You know.
It's an interesting idea, but I don't think that was quite their intention.
No, yeah, probably.
Sure, it'd be nice. It would be nice. Like, so say if a Liquid makes it through, or a Complexity somehow, heavens above, makes it through, it might make it for a more raucous atmosphere, you know. Rather than having to watch EU and be reminded of how much better EU is at Counter-Strike, the NA fans will have something to cope about. That'll be nice for them, I think. At the end of the
everybody
week.
just discounts this event as being like, Like, I think, what is it, last year? It was like IEM Summer or something. I think that event happened, and people were just kind of like, oh, yeah, that event happened, actually.
I'm big friends with an NIP fan, so they won that, and he wouldn't shut up about it, about how it meant that NIP had figured it out, and NIP were going to be the best team in the world. Mm-hmm. No one seemed to care. Even the players didn't seem to care, so...
Yeah, it was just another online tournament at the time, so...
I did kind of feel that way, but... Alright, that kind of wraps it up. Like, IEM Dallas should still be interesting. I mean, FaZe kind of have a really big opportunity here to kind of cement this era, I guess, they're starting to build. They're not quite there yet. Even if they win this, they're quite far away from it. But if they lose this, there's a lot to make up for, right? It's a bit of a mark
if you called the Gambit era an era, then FaZe are already in it. You know?
I didn't.
That's all I have to say. Well, I know, but I'm just... Anybody that's out there that was like, Gambit had an era. Like, no. They had a brief period, perhaps.
They had a moment. That's the best way to put it. But, all right. Thanks for joining me, Yumi. It was all a bit short notice, a bit rushed, so I appreciate it. And as I said before, maybe by the time I clicked end recording, the teams would have changed again. But let's hope not. But that's all for this one. I'll see you next one, and goodbye.